today we're going to be talking about this beautiful vintage Rogers Eagle badged Holiday Snare. It's going to be a wild ride, so buckle up. So this snare is a Rogers Eagle badge Holiday snare drum. I found this snare drum on OfferUp about a year or so ago, and it was in pretty bad shape. So it needed a little bit of love, but I finally got it finished. Learning to play this snare drum was a little different due to the fact that they have these tall boy hoops. They're taller than regular hoops. So when I first got it and I was first playing it, I kept hitting the rim instead of the drum. So, it gave me that tang sound. But with a little bit of practice and just working at it, I got used to it, and now it's fine. But just giving you a little bit of what the growing pains that I had to go through with this. And to be honest with you, I still make that mistake. So once again, it does have the original tall boy hoops. These are chrome over steel. You can tell pretty quickly. Grab a magnet, take it off your refrigerator if you can't find one. And if it sticks, it's chrome over steel. If it's chrome over brass, it will just slide off like so. Okay, our lugs are the bread and butter lugs. These were made from about 1950 to 1959. Before this bread and butter lug, they had what was known as the coffin lug, which was identical to this, but instead of having the ridge down the middle, it was flat. So those preceded the first batch were the coffin lugs, and then somewhere in the 50s switched over to the bread and butter, and then they were pretty much out the door by 1959, because even though they're super cool looking, they were a drawn brass lug. They were beautiful, they were brass, but they were very soft because they are brass. The swivel nut, right, which you'll see inside of all of modern snares, were actually a design first used by Rogers. With the tension rods pulling on the swivel nuts, the majority of these will tear. The majority of all these lugs will tear and they'll fail. Their fail point is right about here. Their second most common fail point is the tab that screws in to the shell, and it's just a bent over piece of brass. So it's just not very strong at all, which is why they went from these to the beaver tail lugs. So even though I think these are super cool and they're very iconic, you want the beaver tail lugs in order to make these work. And I actually still have to go back and correct one of them. In order to make them work, I had to put JB weld inside of them. I was able to shape it in there, but not the liquid JB weld, the one that's more like a putty. You put it in there, then I was able to push the swivel nut through and then just shaped it. Some of them still didn't quite fit, so I ended up having to Dremel some of that JB weld out once it hardened until I found a way to seat the swivel nuts. I'll do a video of how I went about doing that when I correct the one that's still cracked, which I believe is this one right here next to my badge. Once again, this is a Holiday Snare. It's absolutely gorgeous. It has the original wrap. It also has, once again, the Eagle badge, the tall boy hoops. It has your Eagle badge right there, which is absolutely beautiful. That's what I dig the most about these Rogers drums. One thing that you ought to know, obviously Rogers was famous for painting the inside of their shells. During this era, they painted them black. So if you get a hold of a 50s era Rogers and you see that they're painted black inside, that was correct. This one has a reproduction muffler, which you can buy today from Rogers. Now guys, let me tell you what I had to go through. So when I got this snare, like I said, all of these were damaged in one way or another. And I know Rogers, the new version of Rogers, is making their reproduction parts that fit the old ones as well. If you buy Rogers beaver tail lugs, they will not fit the vintage double-sided lugs, okay? They will not fit. The lugs that you get nowadays are the shorter ones, the new ones, the reproductions, so they will not fit this model, okay? So that was kind of a bummer because I thought I was going to be able to get away with just putting reproductions on there and then just storing these away. But I had, like I said, I ended up having to JB weld all of them because they were all cracked or they were showing stress fractures, which are going to lead to cracks. So a little bit more about the snare. If you find these, okay, with this throw off, that is a correct throw off. This throw off was used prior to the clock face throw off that's so popular with Rogers, and these were made by Premier. Okay, so if you find these in a old vintage Rogers snare, they weren't replaced. It's not an aftermarket. They were original to the snare, and to be honest with you, I like them more than the P83 and the P85. The steel is heavier duty. The chroming is nicer, which is obvious because it's Premier. They just feel better. They work better. It's just a superior product to anything Ludwig makes. And if you guys know, I'm a huge Ludwig fan, but man, this throw-off is awesome. You find a lot of the old vintage arms on Ludwigs that have bent or broken. This one is not going anywhere, man. That is super thick, and it works amazingly well. These are discontinued. From what I've read, and I've been able to find at about like 1960, the Power Tone took over. These were also available in steel. And in fact, if you ever want to purchase some vintage drums, there's a great guy. You can find him on Instagram, Greg's Drum Shop out of LA. He had one of these with the Gretsch shell, which I'm sure if you guys are familiar with Dynasonics, you guys will know what I'm talking about. The Gretsch shells, the 7-line shells. I've seen this Holiday with all these same appointments, but just with the Gretsch shell that they ended up using for the Dynasonic prior to using it to the Dynasonic. So that was super cool. It was something that I learned. The butt plate is a very, very generic butt plate, which when I first got the snare, I thought it was wrong. But with all the research I did, it turns out that it is correct. And I actually met Anthony Amadeo at the Chicago Drum Show this past year. Super cool guy. If you guys get a chance, check out his YouTube channel. It's everything Rogers. Guy knows, he's forgotten more than I will ever know in regards to Rogers. So for out there, Anthony, thanks again for the help with this snare. My tension rods are original. If you look at the tension rods, study them. Okay, that's how you can tell they're original. They're super long and tall. Okay, this drum sounds really cool. It's actually, I guess they're all my favorites, right? But I really like using this. If I ever play like jump blues, or I'm doing like Western swing, or really early period music, this is what I like to use because these Towboys give me a really nice crack, or in addition to the crack of the snare. Right? This one was, I guess it was in bad shape, so they spray painted it black, and they ended up covering the Rogers label. So what I did, I took a huge gamble. I used, here, let me show you what I used. I guess I'm out. So I used the DAP brand paint stripper, and what I did is I put the really heavy duty like gelatin type, and I poured that into a cup, and I used Q-tips, and I just dabbed it on the label. And as soon as I dabbed it on with the Q-tip, to dab it very gently on the paint, and then as soon as I saw the paint start to crinkle, I wiped it off with another Q-tip and a towel, and then I used a very lightly damp cloth to wipe it down and neutralize a chemical reaction, and I was able to save the sticker. I was very surprised, guys. I thought I was gonna lose it, but you know, that decal is what makes these drums. Let me recap it. The throw-off is Premier. It has the bread and butter lugs, Tallboy hoops, original white marine pearl, original unbranded generic looking butt plate, eagle badge. Actually, Anthony helped me date this to about like 1957. The decal, Rogers Holiday that you see there. Once again, you can tell that it's aftermarket because it's chrome. And this one does have a set of Tama snare wires, so the wires aren't original, but you know, the hardware on this is all flathead, which is period correct. Everything in here looks period correct. Right now I'm using a modern vintage Aquarian medium drum head, which I really dig. And as I've mentioned, I'm going to be switching over time all to Aquarian because I just think they make a phenomenal product. Any questions, comments, or concerns, just let me know. And thank you once again. Please like and subscribe.